Hi, you'll probably notice that this particular PowerPoint or slide presentation is a little bit different. I actually took the Constitution 101 slideshow from the Department of Education in the state of South Carolina, www.carolinak12.org, and I appreciate the good work they do there. It's made it a lot easier instead of having to come up with all the visual presentations of myself. I think that's one of the great things that they make that available. We're going to talk about, first of all, the origins of the Constitution. What is the U.S. Constitution? First of all, it's important to note that the U.S. Constitution is the supreme law of the land. It is the foundation and source of all authority in the United States. I ask my classes on a routine basis, who governs the United States or what governs the United States? The correct answer is not the president, not Congress, not the Supreme Court, but the Constitution, because all governmental power comes from the Constitution in American law. It provides the framework for the organization of the United States government. Every member of the state legislature, every sheriff in the United States, most government officials, as part of their oath of office, they have to swear an allegiance to the Constitution of the United States, as do all military personnel. So let's first talk about what are the principles of this document. First and foremost, popular sovereignty. The people govern. Now, notwithstanding, we're a Republican form of government, so we elect representatives to do that for us. But in the end, the people govern. The next basic principle of the Constitution is limited government. Our government is not all powerful, and it can only do what the people let it. At times, things can become very frustrating, and we feel like the government is not paying attention to us. But I would encourage each and every one of you, if you ever have that issue happen, call your local state representative. He, in turn, can put you in touch with all other levels of government. You do have a voice, and that's important to know. Another basic principle of the Constitution is separation of powers. Separation of powers helps prevent one branch from becoming too powerful. This also creates the system of checks and balances. When the Constitution was written, there's a myth out there that the branches were supposed to be equal. That's not necessarily the truth. In the Federalist Papers and in other documents, it constantly talks about the preeminence or the superiority of the legislative branch. So if you have to answer the question, who is actually in charge, it should be Congress, not the president, not the Supreme Court, because the Congress directly represents the people. Last but not least, federalism. Federalism is a unique governmental system where power is shared between the national and state governments. Unlike confederalism, which existed under the Articles of Confederation, the states' governments are not sovereign and independent. However, they do have several reserved powers and rights under the federal system. What are checks and balances? Checks and balances are basically this system in which the executive, legislative, and judicial branch check each other's power. For instance, Congress, the legislative branch, makes the laws. However, the president, the head of the executive branch, has the power to veto those laws. And let's say that Congress passes a law that everyone must wear blue on Tuesday. The president signs the law that everyone must wear blue on Tuesday. Obviously, that law challenges freedom of speech as has been interpreted in the Constitution by the Supreme Court as freedom of expression. The judicial branch, beginning with the district courts and later with the Supreme Court, would determine that law is unconstitutional, therefore it is null and void. That is called judicial review. So remember, each of these branches check the other. It's one thing I left out. If the president vetoes a law that is passed by Congress, Congress can override that veto with a 2/3 majority. And that's important to take note of. Who wrote the Constitution? First of all, let's begin by saying that no one person wrote the entire Constitution. However, James Madison, who brought the Virginia Plan with him to Philadelphia, laid the basic framework and is called the father of the Constitution. His important contributions, of course, are the Virginia Plan, separation of powers, and once the Bill of Rights was written, James Madison played a huge role in that. Why was it written? After the Revolutionary War, the Articles of Confederation set up the structure of the U.S. government. The federal government was extremely weak, and this created many problems, such as no separation of powers, only unicameral legislature. There was not a bicameral legislature. A very weak central government where the states held more power than the central government. Congress did not have the power to tax. This meant that we had to borrow money from other nations, which no one wanted to loan us money because they had no way of raising the money, and we had to borrow money from the states. Congress was at the mercy of the states. Also under the Articles, all 13 states had to approve the changes. This made it essentially impossible to make any changes. For any major laws to pass, they had to be approved by 9 of the 13 states, which is very difficult. Congress did not have the power to regulate commerce, which caused competition between the states. It also caused diplomatic issues when states refused to pay for goods that were received from other nations. The other nations came, is like when you don't pay somebody, your parents, a lot of times the people you don't pay come to your parents. Well, the states refused to pay money. Therefore, the foreign governments came to the Confederation Congress, who said, we can't get money from the states. Of course, we talked about last unit, Shays' Rebellion, which was an uprising of Massachusetts farmers. It was so difficult in getting other states to help Massachusetts suppress the rebellion that it scared the states, and they decided, you know what, maybe we need to try this Constitution thing out. And last but not least, this section of the discussion, when was it written? It was written on May 25th to September 25th, 1787 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The intention was to revise the Articles of Confederation, and it ended up replacing the Articles and creating a new government called the Constitutional Convention. At this point, we'll go ahead and stop this particular screencast, and we'll pick up with part 2 momentarily.